August 12, 2018, 2:41 p.m., Cades Cove overlook in the Great Smoky Mountains. A single frame fixes the Mercers in clear air, Andrew's hand on the wheel minutes earlier, Laura's quick smile that always arrives after she double-checks the first aid kit, Noah narrating ridgelines like a student who has finally found his subject, Lily testing a new mic and telling the clouds to give her something dramatic. At 3:18 p.m., every phone on their family plan dies in a narrow valley between the loop road and an unmarked service gate, the kind employees use when storms blow branches across the lanes. What happened to Andrew, Laura, Noah, and Lily Mercer? 7 years later, not a drone but a state wildfire LiDAR survey will register a shape the human eye kept missing. Before we get to that scan, we follow the silence minute by minute and ask why ordinary joy would choose such a difficult place to end. The woods held their last words longer than anyone knew. The day had that after-rain brightness that makes edges look newly invented. Rangers waved cars through. Families photographed deer because it felt like the right thing to do with a good hour. The Mercers' SUV moved with purpose but not hurry. They bought 2 lemonades and a coffee at 2:28, receipts folded and tucked, a rhythm too familiar to announce itself as a clue. Somewhere near a pull-off lined with scrub, an orange glint lived in brush for a heartbeat, small as a tool tag and just as easily ignored. A staff-only junction waited up the road, the kind of shoulder that looks like an invitation if you already know it exists. A tower recorded a 5-second 911 attempt at 3:17 from Noah's phone, a call that slipped, tried to rise, and failed. 1 minute later, the network lost them all. Night does the work of narrowing possibilities. The hotel room remained paused, charger in the wall, a book face down to save a paragraph, Laura's careful looped L on a receipt that never expected to be evidence. In the morning, a welfare check became a file. A copy of their 241 photo slid into plastic and began to live under fluorescent light. Searches started with certainty and then with sweat. The loop road was combed and recombed. Helicopter glare washed the canopy and returned only green. Dogs worked until heat muddied their intention and dusk asked them to try again. Out past the public turnouts, a maintenance dogleg bent behind Laurel and led to a comma of terrain maps don't love to admit. The last image of the Mercers moved like a prayer through inboxes and ranger stations. What didn't travel was the staff camera pointed at that dogleg, mounted for employee safety, not for tourists. At 3:22 p.m., it caught 2 seconds of metal sliding left to right where no visitor traffic should be. The angle lied, the fact of motion didn't. That flicker would later stand up next to a LiDAR return and say, together, that something directed the Mercers into a part of the park where even a careful search could pass in shouting distance and miss the point. The gap that began at 3:18 p.m. didn't just swallow people, it learned how to look normal. Somewhere close, a culvert took on more than water. Some things hide best when they pretend to be maintenance. The overnight tasks hardened because logs don't negotiate. At 7:06 a.m., the hotel called for a welfare check. By 7:31, a ranger wrote 4 names with the pencil pressure of someone who means to get them back. The room felt paused, not abandoned, Lily's tote labeled with her own system, Noah's printouts on canopy transects clipped to a cheap clipboard, a blue key ring Laura bought at a hospital fundraiser, Andrew's wallet under the lamp with a receipt for gas and nothing else. Downstairs, the clerk replayed a cheerful goodbye and a question about which pullouts are best when the light goes thin. Momentum had broken somewhere close. The evidence that won't argue lined up first. Gate logs, SUV in before noon, no authorized exit later. Visitor center video, a gray vehicle at 2:12 p.m. with bug splatter that matched earlier images, Lily walking backward to frame her family into the edge. The 2:28 purchase documented by an easy looped L. Then a stall. At 3:17 p.m., a 5-second emergency call from Noah's phone and an abrupt collapse into silence by 3:18. That gap lives in searchers' bones. It tells you what to do with your hours. Units fanned along the loop and into the spokes. Air support painted the park into grids that soothe from altitude and mock you on the ground. Trailheads were cleared, culverts checked for slide marks, low shoulders read like braille. Tips arrived with the tenderness of strangers. A retired couple said a driver spoke to a man in a cap near a staff gate. A cyclist heard a muffled shout and decided it was a dropped pack. A clerk insisted the daughter asked for batteries, but the skew put that story on a different day. The pile grew and bent and made space for hope. Detectives kept only what could stand alone. They also asked for a geofence warrant on the staff gate area between 3:10 and 3:30 p.m., a small circle of time drawn around a place most visitors never see. You don't do that on day one in every county. Here they did. The warrant took days, and those days filled with sweat. A maintenance road that looked like a rumor performed like a fact. Orange tape marked where teams had already doubled back, a looping confession written by fatigue. On a trunk just inside the dogleg, a vertical scuff lifted raw wood at shoulder height. Farther in, a lower twin. Between them, a shallow sickle of crushed leaves that read like the edge of a bumper choosing not to correct. The partial tread cast at the runoff channel recorded more about water than rubber. A gray fabric strip stuck to stone took a leaf with it as it died. Industrial cloth tape by Weave, nothing heroic, but proof that work, not wandering, had passed here. When the geofence results finally arrived, a name rose from the cluster like a buoy. Not a family phone. Not a ranger. A subcontracted security guard's device that pinged the staff junction area twice inside the window and then left the park by a service route. He'd worked irregular shifts for a facilities contractor, the kind that pairs keys with a vest and silence. He would not be the only one, but he was the first you could point to without apology. 2 seconds of metal and a phone that shouldn't be there changed the question from where to who. That staff road had been cut for storms and forgotten by everyone except the people paid to remember it. With escort and keys, detectives walked it as if the ground could be offended. The gate sighed. Air cooled. Cicadas took over the soundtrack like a truth you can't talk around. 15 yards in, the first scuff blushed raw. The second hunkered lower where Laurel closed. The distance between them matched a bumper's curve. A shallow oval on the forest floor looked too smooth for wind, too intentional for deer, exactly the kind of almost nothing that tells your stomach more than your head is ready to admit. They bagged a thumbnail chip that held a dull silver smear that wasn't paint so much as oxidized tool. You don't solve a case with a smear. You let it refuse a bad story. A volunteer analyst, teacher by trade, cartographer by love, overlaid heat from the first 2 days of search and found the comma-shaped blind pocket where the dogleg and an old burn scar conspired. It sat within earshot of the staff camera that caught the 3:22 flicker. Day 1 and Day 2 wrapped perfectly around it, the way a neat paragraph will curve around a truth and keep the page looking clean. The team stepped into the comma and found an absence arranged like intent. The litter looked random until you noticed a patch where nothing broke, a table-cleared oval you could deny if you needed to sleep. The forest had spoken in a grammar of restraint and interruption. The security guard from the geofence, Graham Lyle, clocked irregular hours with a contractor that handled locks and gates after storms. His device had no reason to be where the Mercer's signal died. Lyle said he'd been called to assess a downed limb. The work order system had no record of that call. A hunter's trail cam, posted legally along a game path that crossed a service shoulder, handed over a still, an older pickup with a clay-colored quarter panel nosing into the dogleg at 3:20 something. The timestamp drifted a minute, but the angle sang. In the passenger seat sat a second figure, posture easy, face turned away, no family resemblance required, only a shared understanding of where the park keeps its scars. Tips will try to save you time and waste it. Paperwork will ask your patience and earn it back. A facilities coordinator, Denise Ward, approved routes for contractors, including after-hours checks. Her name didn't appear on the geofence, but her truck did on a different camera the same afternoon, one that watched a utility gate farther downslope. Her text history suggested a comfort with improvising access when the park's own crews were stretched thin. None of it proved harm. All of it pointed at opportunity. Back at the dogleg, the culvert that handled flash runoff during summer storms mouth-breathed under Laurel. Its box concrete face had collected branches and silt for years, a polite mess that made water choose a slower route. No one crawled it yet, no one guessed at its throat. A LiDAR survey months later would notice how the ground above it sagged into a geometry that didn't match the hillside. For now, the team flagged it, wrote it down, and moved on with the discouraging confidence that only perfect caution produces. Small things were pointing in one direction. A comma-shaped hole, a staff camera's blink, a device where it shouldn't be, a pickup that behaves like a key. The culvert waited without hurry, because water always teaches patience. Sometimes a place hides you by calling itself maintenance. April 2025 arrived with a winter's worth of broken limbs and a state wildfire prevention grant to map fuel loads in high-risk corridors. The tool was airborne LiDAR, not the cinematic drone shot people imagine. Pulses raked the canopy, stitched a point cloud, and subtracted trees until the ground lay bare in digital gray. A hydrologist scrolling through returns on a quiet Wednesday saw it first. A rectangular depression near the maintenance dogleg, too crisp for a natural slump, aligned like something man-made had slowly taken the hill's shape from below. She flagged the tile and pinged the county SAR coordinator. Coordinates can bypass disbelief faster than sentences. The approach was dull in the way good approaches need to be. No heroics. Rope bags. Thigh-deep laurel. A work crew unsealed the culvert face, cleared brush, and set pumps to push the pooled water into a bypass. Silt belched black, then ran clear enough to send a camera head into the box channel. 10 feet in, the feed met resistance that wasn't stone or snag. The probe knocked plastic, then metal, then a hard edge the light turned into a dirty silver plane. The camera backed out and eased in again. Angles don't lie when water stops defending them. They widened access with the care that crime scenes deserve even when the word crime hasn't been stamped on the paperwork. Portable lights hum when the woods decide to hold their breath. This clearing hummed like a remembered song. A winch kissed something buried under silt and waited while pumps argued with physics. The nose of a silver SUV rose shyly, glass collapsed outward, leaf mold peeling from paint and sheets. A VIN at the right angle silenced the clearing the way verdicts do. The Mercer rental. Not under a green quilt of years, but in a throat designed to swallow fast water and anything a storm could carry. The culvert did not find them. It kept them because it was built to. Inside the cabin, objects remained obstinately loyal to chronology. Laura's folded receipts, Noah's softened topo corners, Lily's camera strap with the braided thread, Andrew's key motions mapped into the seat rails racked 2 notches too far back for his height. The trunk held a set of things no one brings for a scenic loop: industrial cloth tape, restraints with sprue marks that pointed to a handful of retailers in summer 2018, and a pry bar that still wore the ghost of a barcode. Those details mattered, but the path mattered more. The culvert intake sat close enough to the blind pocket that a vehicle nudge just so could be winched, rolled, or simply surrendered to gravity. This wasn't theatrical. It was workmanlike. Evidence moved in with the second perimeter. No assumption of prints. Adhesive travels and water eats what pride wants to keep. Fibers were lifted and labeled. The culvert silt was sieved like a patient apology. A geochemist took small bags of fine and coarser fraction because chronology lives in grain size when metal has been sleeping. The scene boss wrote, LiDAR anomaly, culvert intake, vehicle. Boxes took on the weight of nouns. Emotion arrived in ways that kept their dignity. A ranger turned off a light to reduce glare on plastic, and the clearing darkened as if agreeing to let the day stop early. A volunteer with neat handwriting wrote names on evidence logs and paused only once, over the word strap, thinking of hands that tie braids to keep cameras from slipping. There was no spectacle, only pressure, the knowledge that the place where water chooses speed had been asked to keep a secret for 7 years and had done so without malice. The culvert answered the how. The geofence and the trail cam whispered the who. The rest would be paperwork, which is to say, the kind of story courts trust. A rectangle in a point cloud changed what people were allowed to hope. Paperwork is not romance. It is how truth survives being argued with. The LiDAR note met the culvert inventory, which met the geofence return, which met the trail cam still. A cluster analysis on the warrant data put Graham Lyle's device at the staff junction twice inside the 310 to 330 window, then exiting down a service route into a dead zone that only employees use. Lyle said he was called to check a limb. The contractor's dispatch log didn't show a call. Cell records showed a text to a facilities coordinator at 3:05, running gate loop, dogleg first. The coordinator, Denise Ward, replied 2 minutes later, "Copy, use West Culvert if loop clogs." It read like maintenance. It also read like choreography. The trail cam still of the clay panel pickup fit the quarter-mile between the staff camera blink and the culvert intake. A nearby utility camera, mounted for a different purpose entirely, caught the same pickup heading out after 3:30 by a back gate that logs license plates intermittently. The plate hit was partial, but clean enough to narrow the field to 4 vehicles registered to contractors with access that month. Lyle's old truck was on that list. Ward's county car was on a different one. Patterns can be altruistic or predatory. They look the same from far away. Search warrants opened phones. Ward's messages were mostly dry, schedules, gate codes, weather notes, until they weren't. A thread from the week prior to August 12, 2018, debated best pockets to stage if loop gets busy. Another referenced commas where dogs don't commit. It sounded like jargon until detectives laid those words on the heat map and found the blind pocket shaped like a comma the volunteer had circled. Ward's calendar documented a meeting with a foreman who denied any talk about staging. Lyle's notes app held a crude sketch of the dogleg and an arrow toward the culvert face. He had named that arrow throat. Retail remained useful but secondary. The restraints sprue marks narrowed suppliers. A procurement subpoena matched a bulk shipment to a store near Maryville. The footage archive coughed up a man in a vest buying the exact items on July 31st. He kept his head down. He paid cash. You could argue that half the county dressed like that in summer. You couldn't argue with how his reflection in the automatic door glass lined up with Lyle's driver's license. The pry bar's label ghost matched the same SKU family, and while the register didn't hold a name, it held a time that lived next to a gas receipt on Lyle's phone. Ordinary days don't stack their edges that neatly unless someone planned it. When Lyle opened his door to a warrant, he looked like a man who had been rehearsing a neutral face for years. He did not run. In a shed out back, a pegboard held outlines for tools that weren't there. On a high shelf, a half-used roll of industrial cloth tape had been torn once and pressed back on itself, adhesive traveling into a stiff, useless kiss that crime labs unfurl the way archivists handle letters. Ward's house said, "Manager, more than field." A drawer held a printed map of service roads with small pencil marks that weren't quite on the lines. A calendar box on August 12th was filled with a single diagonal slash. Lyle talked first, not to apologize but to explain systems. He said crowds make wrong moves look normal. He said culverts take what they're given. He said you can steer people with kindness faster than force, and that a blind pocket will hold sound the way a cupped hand holds water. Ward asked for counsel, then for a glass of water, then said her job was to keep roads open and tourists moving and that sometimes required creativity. Creativity does not place a family in a culvert. Creativity doesn't switch off 4 phones at 3:18. 2 employees had learned the park's grammar and turned it into punctuation. Now the question became what else the comma had been asked to conceal. A maintenance plan can read like a script if you tilt it right. The blind pocket on the map was no longer a hole in coverage. It was a route. Crews went in by the book. Rope, flags, slow voices, the kind of patience that outlives bravado. The culvert intake had given up the Mercer SUV. The slope above it still needed to be read. Hydrology made the hill speak in layers. Soil cores pulled from just uphill showed a compacted lens where weight had rested, not for minutes but for hours, long enough for leaf litter to remember a shape and for roots to kink around pressure. A careful grid opened the ground the way a conservator opens an envelope. Personal items appeared first, not because the woods were cruel, but because objects announced the lives that touched them. A flattened souvenir coin Andrew made because Lily laughed at the machine. A blue key ring Laura bought at the fundraiser, the corner of Noah's topo map thumb softened at the fold, the braided camera strap Lily called lucky. Identification followed with the dignity those names deserved. The radio slowed to timestamps and nouns. A circle of people stepped back and didn't pretend the wind wasn't different now. Court was inevitable because paperwork had done its job. Lyle went first. He mapped doglegs and commas as if he had invented them. He described how you steer a vehicle to the culvert's mouth without dramatics and how you let gravity join your argument. He said it like instructions because once it had been. His attorney tried to tuck those words under illness. Lyle unfolded them into choice. The verdict came quickly and landed heavily. Multiple life sentences without parole, plus years that stack into an architecture of never. In the gallery, Laura's mother held their 241 photo and exhaled as if air had finally been returned to her body. Ward's story was managerial, policy, urgency, guests first, but evidence is unsentimental. Her messages used a vocabulary that fit the blind pocket too well to be coincidence. Her map marks skirted rules with the confidence of someone who didn't expect to be read closely. The jury saw planning and proximity and the talent to stand next to harm while calling it logistics. They returned guilty on all counts and recommended life with the possibility of parole deep in a future no one in that room planned to see. The judge agreed and spoke about public trust as if it were a natural resource you could poison. After the trials, people walked the park differently, not because trees learn names, but because people do. Near a small overlook, a stone with the Mercers' names appeared without fanfare. A bench faced a field where deer sometimes stand too long. A laminated card went up on a ranger station corkboard. Service roads, log, culverts, inspect, blind pockets, check twice. The LiDAR team formalized a protocol to flag man-made geometry hiding in slopes after every major storm. Geofence requests became day-one tools instead of last resorts. Utility cameras quietly turned to watch the spaces maps treat like margins. None of it is cinematic. All of it works. The Mercer room didn't become a shrine because their family refused to let grief petrify. Andrew's crew named a safe stretch of repaired highway after a man who respected edges. Nurses told night shift stories about Laura's calm hands. Noah's classmates finished his canopy study and pushed his name to the top of the author line with a note that told the truth. Lily's friends cut her last footage into a small film that sounds like rain on leaves and a jacket zipper and the laugh you hear from off-camera when a shot is right. People watched and felt the ordinary ache of wanting a world that returns what it borrows. There is no twist that heals. There is work, and work is the way love keeps moving when it can't fix what happened. The photo at 2:41 p.m. still stands up to the wind. The rest of us can do better at listening to small things that point in the same direction, sharing maps before they grow smug, and refusing the wrong story while it's still trying to dress like maintenance. We don't get to choose what vanishes, but we choose how hard we look. Maps get kinder when more hands hold them.